Thank you, Harry, for pressing the button. Welcome all to the Shopware United panel discussion on performance. Thank you very much for coming out. We appreciate it. Today we have a panel with three experts on it, so very much looking forward to that. For those who do not know Shopware United, we are a community-driven organization that wants to bring a more English-speaking community to the Shopware space. We have nothing against German speaking, but some of us are just terrible at it. So that's why we host webinars in English, why we host a community voice project where we give feedback to Shopware itself, and many other initiatives. All of that you can find on our website, shopwareunited.com. We even have a Slack channel, so I encourage anyone to go and visit that and join, participate. If you have thoughts or ideas for these panel discussions, please submit them. That can either be done on Slack or to info@shopwareunited.com. We would love to get your input on the topics that you find interesting. It can be technical or non-technical. That is both fine. We do different topics. We have about one per month, per 2 months, roughly. With that, I will start to introduce our panel. So first of all, we have Erwin Hofman here. He is a lead developer and consultant at Rumvision. Next, we have Jon Arne Satras. He is VP of Innovation at Sentia Mobile and Image Engine. And last, we have Wouter den Otter, Managing Director at Sportdesk at H1. Welcome. Thank you all for joining and for making time to talk about performance, a topic that is all near and dear to you, as I understand. Maybe to kick off, Erwin, I will put it to you as quite an expert in performance. Can you introduce a little bit the concept of performance, give it a little bit of context for us, and what does it mean for different stakeholders, such as maybe the end user or a player such as Google?
Yeah, that's a very broad question that can be answered in multiple ways, but I'll give it a go. I would almost say back in the days, we would think about server response time and would especially think about, well, increasing hosting specs, server specs. However, I think that Google actually nailed it with introducing specific, well, I should call it front-end metrics, because websites started to grow. And although we went from 3G internet connection to 4G internet connection, nowadays 5G if you're lucky, although it's consumer 5G, so it might only be 4.1G actually. Nevertheless, internet speeds increased, but we also continue to ship more JavaScript and CSS. So yeah, obviously hosting is still playing an important role. But I would say because of websites growing over time, the front end matters as well. And that's why you could say Google came up with Core Web Vitals, and they actually introduced 3 metrics that are part of the Core Web Vitals. In total, there are 6 Web Vitals metrics. And time to first byte isn't one of them, which is strange because it all starts with the time to first byte and response time, I would say. But one metric, I won't dive into all of these metrics, but one metric that is part of Core Web Vitals is the LCP, largest contentful paint. And the LCP is about when the biggest element becomes visible, which matters from talking about different stakeholders, which matters from a user experience perspective. Because my mother doesn't care about what the server response time is. She only cares about when things become visible, because if she's Googling for a specific product and if she is ending up on a landing page, she wants to have the feeling that the page is in fact responding. So that's why the visual parts are important from a user, well, yeah, experience perspective. But obviously, and luckily, time to first byte is actually taken into account as part of LCP metric, because if you have a slow server response time, then your LCP will become slow as well. You would expect and this is an interesting nuance, you would expect that if the server response time is fast, the LCP will be fast as well. But that's where I would say front-end nuances are coming in. So you can, Photorama is a very, well, I would say popular image gallery solution for Magento. But if you're using Photorama, then rendering the image really depends on JavaScript, which then depends on what other tasks are happening in the browser. And the LCP will happen later in time than when you would use an alternative image gallery solution, for example. So yeah, a slow server response time in some way is already part of Google's Core Web Vitals. Google cares about Core Web Vitals, and well, I should actually say Google introduced Core Web Vitals in the hope to achieve that all stakeholders start to care about Core Web Vitals. And they succeeded in that, because as soon as Google introduced Core Web Vitals, SEO specialists then also started to care about Core Web Vitals. It's maybe still too technical for the typical SEO specialist. So that's where our roles are coming in. Most of us, are technical people, maybe even developers. So that's where our role and maybe knowledge are coming in. Influence as well. The type of plugins that we are using, maybe obviously the platform itself also plays a role, in this case Shopware. I'm a technical guy. I'm a developer myself as well, so I can't really elaborate on this from a marketing perspective, but obviously if the page speed improves, then it should impact conversion rate and revenue as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very complete introduction. Maybe quickly, Jon, I want to also ask you, because you first and foremost focus on images, so I think that touches the largest contentful paint. I'm guessing that your clients normally reach out to you and say, "Look, my web shop is slow. You know, help me." Is that generally how performance is perceived by a web shop owner, for example?
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah. More or less, I would say. And I'm saying that because the general knowledge, I think, about web performance and what it is and what to how to address this, it's still it's still not top of mind, and it's still not taught at marketing schools around, and making a website perform better is it's an art of multiple things. There's obviously JavaScript and CSS and all sorts of stuff happening in addition to images, but it's like Irvin is saying, the largest conceptual paint is probably one of the more important user-centric metrics to monitor and look at, and thanks to Google and their marketing of these Core Web Vitals, more and more shop owners have been become aware. So that's great news, and also very good job by by Google. So it's more like we get the question, how can you guys, how can Image Engine help us improve our Google rankings, basically, because they've heard also that the Core Web Vitals, they're affecting the index, the search index. I want to climb higher on the results page, hence I need to improve my Core Web Vitals. So that's kind of the angle many of our customers come in, and from our perspective too, it's relatively easy. We have an easy answer for them, or it's easy for them to understand, because in many cases the largest contentful paint item on the screen is actually an image. It's a hero image or a banner of some sort, and there are quite a few relatively simple, not tricks, but it's like you have to do it right, and then the largest contentful paint metric will definitely improve. So yeah, it's more from that angle our customers come in.
Yeah, that's interesting. So at the end of the day, Google is the only stakeholder that really matters. It seems. Wouter, you're probably on the receiving end of quite a few emails as an agency owner of people complaining that their web shop might not be fast enough. For you, who are the most important stakeholders and how do they perceive performance?
Well, those type of messages are usually like, help, my web shop is really slow. And it could be anything, it could be their internet connection. And so there's a lot of things to look into. We do start, and that's why I always say there's three things that are important in performance, and you know the joke. But the three important things is monitor, monitor, monitor. Just be aware of what's going on. I really like the Google approach, where you take the end user basically as a gradient, and you say, okay, it should work well for the end user. But there's several other things. So that's an indicator, and a bad score there is a red flag. But for us, that's where we start to look at, okay, what's going on? And from there, we will look at anything that is related to performance. And performance can also, it could work really well for one user, and it could work well for 10 users, but how about 20,000 concurrent users to your web shop? How is that doing in performance? And there can be several other factors that you have to take into account. And so we take a holistic, is also a nice approach to what's going on. So and we have I have an interesting use case I want to share more about. Now could be a good time.
Yeah.
But to start with, I'll share a little. How do I do this? Share my screen. So I have some nice pictures. This is how it started. This is what I call the roller coaster of the time to first byte for our customer Boekenbali. And beginning of the year it was nice, and we released Shopware 6.5, and it skyrocketed. We did a lot of things. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. End of the line, it was good. Something you could also see in, we use a tool called New Relic, you're probably familiar with. You see the same kind of roller coaster ride. Now we're in a much better position, although we still see it rise again. I'm gonna unshare it again. Is that working?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm back, right? Yeah, so that's the roller coaster ride. And during that ride, together with the customer, we looked at all the things we could change or implement, or things that. So, for instance, we discovered a stupid thing. There was an extension, and it looked at the I think it was something back in stock. Alexander is here, so he can help me with the more technical stuff. It was an extension, and it looked at the stock numbers, and after every 5 minutes, it cleared the cache, which is not a good thing for performance. So you need to find this out. The cache was not implemented at its best, so we implemented Redis, Varnish, Cloudflare. So that's more in the direction of Jon. Image optimization. There were so many things we took into account, and then after everything, you change it and you see how it's working, and in that way, we finally got it to the a position where it's working well. Another thing to take into account, so you can have a lot of users. This customer, they have quite a lot of users, but they also have over 500,000 products, which is quite a lot. They sell secondhand books, which means every book they have is unique. So you can have 10 copies of one book, but they're all unique products. They want to grow with this, so we need to be taking that into account. And there's a lot of extensions that were used. So sort of behind our back, they set up Hello Retail, which is very nice, but also has an impact on your front end. Lots of things to monitor, take into account, and gradually, step by step, try to improve it and see how it's going.
All right. Yeah, so that's interesting. So while time to first byte might not be like one of the core web vitals, it does make sense to, as you say, address it by checking
It was for us the
over.
biggest indicator, yes.
Yeah.
And the problem with it is one of the so we first had the front end developers look at this, and they said the whole time to first byte is like a blanket over all the other measurements.
Yeah.
So and we knew we had to solve this first, otherwise you can't look into the other stuff if you don't fix this first. And it was really bad, you know, like 4 seconds time to first bytes. That's really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you would look into database queries that are slow, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
probably something I would do with New Relic, which you mentioned to
Yeah,
see
exactly.
which are the
And
biggest violations.
our so our background is before we started working with Shopware, we did a lot of Magento. And the good thing about Magento is it's really slow, and so you learn a lot about how to improve performance. And we took all this expertise basically to Shopware. And one of the things we also learned is the database in itself is usually in the end when you fix everything, all the other things, database will be the bottleneck.
Yeah.
And to solve that, we set up a separate database server, and that
Right.
worked really well as well. Yeah.
Right. To make sure it's not competing for the same resources with
Yeah.
whatever else running on
Yeah.
the application. Okay. So
I-
there's quite a few concrete recommendations that you're giving, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
have a separate database.
Yeah.
Use New Relic to actually see what kind of queries are running. You mentioned caching and
Caching,
plugins that tend to break caching and indexing. I
clean
think,
up extensions. There's a
yeah,
lot of there can be a lot of clutter in extensions, and not just how do you say, configure them to you don't turn them off, you remove them if you don't use them, because the impact is not just in the code, could also be in the database. So
yeah,
clean up, yeah. And let me see, I'm going from my Redis varnish, caching, Cloudflare, Elasticsearch, of course. Another interesting one is if you look at the server and we're talking about a lot of usage, sometimes you get a lot of usage from bots, like bad bots or bots that you don't want. And
AI bots now, right? I think
yeah,
who was it that was aggressively spidering the whole web? I think one of the
I
one
think
of
so
the
too. Yeah.
yeah.
So really look at the bots, and sometimes you can take out like 20-30% of the server usage by blocking the bad bots.
Yeah, really interesting. And maybe Erwin, what are some of the violators that you're looking out for when you get a site that is underperforming?
Violations, you said.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, obviously plugins. Well, when I get cases, I do see similarities between different cases on the same platform. I would say, but it's a very rough estimation. I would say 50% has the same challenges because, well, running on the same platform, and the other 50% is really what people are doing themselves on top of a theme, platform, own plugins that they are installing. One example is I typically see this in I'm not sure if I pronounce it correctly in English, but Laravel cases.
Yeah.
But I've also seen this happening in Magento cases, and well, I want to say maybe even a few Shopware cases where fonts were embedded using the add import rule in their CSS style sheet. And then you get a change request basically, which is then delaying the white screen for even more than it needs to be blocked, obviously. So yeah, it's can be, well, once again, it can be your own stuff customization that you're doing on top of a platform. It can be some specific plugins that you're installing. And then not only, as Wouter is suggesting, well, typically server-side impact, but it can also be some very specific front-end files, JavaScripts that plugins are injecting that are then prioritizing themselves over any other, well, first-party resources, which could then also both delay, once again, the white screen or LCP metric, but maybe even also blocking the main thread. So if I then try to click on the hamburger menu or add to cart button, then the browser is still occupied by running that other JavaScript. And as a result, it feels like the browser is not responding, but a user might perceive it as if the website is not responding.
Yeah.
And they might lose trust in a website and then leave the website altogether and go to a competitor maybe. And I'm now basically talking about the IMP metric, which Google introduced last March this year.
Yeah. All right. So maybe to summarize, blocking files, right? So whatever is blocking downloading the assets, unresponsiveness, definitely something to look out for.
Yeah.
Yeah, very clear. Sarah, I see you have a question.
Yeah, is it okay to have questions now, or is there a QA later?
We will have a QA later, so if it can wait, then we'll circle back to it. I should have mentioned that maybe at the start, but yeah, we'll have a QA for sure.
Okay, thanks. Then I wait a little bit. Yeah, thanks.
Great. So from my experience in analyzing underperforming web shops, what I see happen often is that the agency builds a beautiful web shop, and then client gets it in their hands and starts to upload the biggest image assets that they can do, because it has to be super crisp, sharp on the biggest 4K monitor that you can find. This tends to block if you try to download 50 megabytes of bitmap image. Jon, what can we do about this?
Yeah. Yeah, luckily there's a lot of things that we can do about it. So that's good. The method that you described now is sort of that's the default kind of. You have this image and you want to publish it, and you publish it, using the means and tools that you have available. Whether that's FTPing the image over to your server or pushing the publish button in some sort of CMS, it's not really gonna do any good, because there's so much more that should have been done with that image. Just to put some context to how many useless bytes we're pushing. With Image Engine, we're obviously then in the business of optimizing images, and the average image coming out of Image Engine is 80% smaller than the origin image. 80%, so that means that there is lots of useless data out there, and when I say useless, I mean useless in terms of it doesn't matter to the human eye. The human eye can't see any difference between the large image, the big original image, and the optimized image.
So you're not even talking about meta information or location, whatever. You are actually talking about the image itself.
Yeah, usually it's the image itself that's the binary data that makes the most of that size reduction. But there's also EXIF data, like location and camera information and stuff like that. But that's yeah, usually a small part of that. And in addition, obviously, especially in the e-commerce business, our mobile users are also the majority of the users. I don't know what's your experience is. It probably varies, but at least more than 50%, right? And
yeah,
maybe up in the 90s are coming from mobile devices. And with Image Engine, we have this approach that we're also catering for all these different mobile devices and the network speed, and try to do as much as we can with the available information, right? So the network speed and the device properties or capabilities, if you will, such as screen size and color depth, and which image format is performing best on this particular device, operating system, things like that. And usually then we end up generating between 12 and 15 different variants of that same origin image. At the 95th percentile, it's like 10, 11. To cover like 95% of your user base, diverse user base, you need 10 variants of an image. And who's gonna we don't want to generate that, or you don't want to spend time creating all these variants. So it's much better to have that automated. But can if I'm going to summarize that into one sentence, like we need to stop thinking about images as static content, because they're not. Even if it's a binary file that we upload, it's definitely not a static file. It should be optimized. It's most likely obese. It's way too big, too heavy to be displayed directly to the end users. So and this is where image CDNs like Image Engine come into play. There's a Image Engine extension in the Shopware marketplace as well. So you're welcome to give that a try. It should be an easy setup. Like I said also in the beginning, that's a low hanging fruit to at least try it and see if your LCP improves. It's a simple experiment. If I can add one last thing, by reducing the footprint or the size of the images by 50%, you're also reducing the carbon footprint of your site, which is important here in Europe these days. So the less data you push over the wire, the less carbon emissions does your site produce. It's obviously a complex calculation to arrive at the correct number, but the rule of thumb, less data means less emissions. So that's also worth taking into account.
Yeah. All right, and I just want to index on one thing that you mentioned, but because you mentioned that you generate different image formats, I'm always telling people to upload either JPEG or PNG, but so you might also serve different, let's say, file extensions to different devices.
Yes, that's correct. So yeah, where should I start? Let's start with PNG. Let's just stop using PNG, okay? PNG is a totally useless format these days. Do not upload or publish any PNG files. When that is said, most of the modern browsers out there today support AVIF, and at least WebP is well supported out there today. But we still, Image Engine still actually serves quite a bit of JPEG, regular JPEG, and that's maybe a little bit how Image Engine works. In some cases, the origin image is already optimized to JPEG, and then there's not more to do unless we want to compromise on the image quality, and then we just serve the original JPEG. But it still accounts for around 25% of all the traffic through Image Engine, and WebP, after we enabled AVIF and JPEG XL, which I'll come to later, WebP is about the same, 20-25%. AVIF being supported by both the Apple camp and the Chrome Google camp, it's about 40%. And then lastly, the new kid on the block, JPEG XL, is about 15-ish%, 20-ish% still, and that's only because the Apple family supports JPEG XL. Yeah. So yeah, there are many, and obviously we have SVG and things as well, which is also growing in popularity, which is definitely to be preferred, but not so much for product images, obviously. So that's kind of the distribution.
Yeah, good point. I think this is an interesting illustration of what in my experience is the trick with performance optimization, right? Because sure, you can do performance optimization, but it's very subjective how much you might do. and what it pays off. So I'd love to I think hear from all of you, and maybe I'll start with you, Wouter, because you're at the forefront of normally selling this to a customer. How do you calculate the ROI on performance optimization? When is enough enough? And maybe you can illustrate this with a case study or an actual example where you saw that it made sense to at some point you say, okay, this is good.
Yeah, so it's very hard to sell it, especially upfront, because we know the statistics with I don't know, the bigger e-commerce platforms in the US. Every second saves saves so many euros or this percentage in your conversion. I never want to go there. I don't want to promise anything concerning conversion. That's impossible, especially on a custom web shop. For the use case with Bookabali, I unfortunately can't show you any data. What I do know is, and it makes sense, the 4 seconds time to first byte was hurting, like really hurting, and they were still doing okay-ish, but the budget we had on every suggestion they said do it, do it, do it. So we set up a plan, and we took where we basically went through like okay, this is going to take so many hours or this much investment, and we looked at the impact and we said, okay, we should just start with this one, start, and then just went through the whole list, and we ended up doing everything. So
Okay.
basically we had open blank check for this because it was really hurting. So that's hard to put into numbers, but because of the
Yeah.
pain they felt and marketing wasn't very stressed, we had the green light for everything. And in the end, all the numbers went back, and now there's quite some significant growth in their conversion, and
Yeah.
just especially what you will see is when your performance is doing well overall, people tend to stay longer on your web shop and look at more pages, so they don't leave. That's the thing. They stay in the shop, and it will affect your conversion.
Okay. But would it at least be fair to say then that maybe, identify some potential targets to optimize, but do them one at a time and see the effect
Yeah.
instead of just rush in, try to optimize everything down to the last second?
Yeah, well, because if you do everything together and then see if it works, you might have like 4 out of 5 things should work, but 1/5 doesn't work, and then you know what I mean. So it's better to do
Yeah.
it step by step and give it time.
Yeah.
Well, Alexander, he's still muted, but I remember like I sort of panicked, and he said, "No, give it a few days. The cache is warming." You have to be patient, and sometimes just look at the numbers for a longer time and see how it's going, and then do your next step. Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
That makes
and
sense.
one thing I forgot to mention is, so we're now in a more relaxed area with this customer, but it doesn't mean we are relaxing. We still you have to be cleaning up, like you said, the database. You can do like a monthly routine on cleaning up your systems, your database. Go
Yeah.
through anything that's still clutter, and you keep improving, because it's on the other hand, it's growing. Shopware 6 is growing. Every update will give you a bigger portion of Shopware,
Yeah.
and it does help to use the, how do you say in English, the kaasschaaf. Just keep taking stuff off that you don't
Cheese
need.
slicer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe not just Shopware, right? But also all the plugins that you might install
Yeah,
or all the extensions you install, they also keep adding features. So yeah, that's a
exactly.
very good point to make a habit uh, out of it. Erwin, what's your experience here?
Yeah, I wanted to add a bit about, well, first of all, I agree with everything that Wouter is saying. But it is hard to put a number to what your return on investment will be. But you can approach it the other way around, although it might be a bit spicy and might be a bit difficult to convince everyone. But you could do the following. You could deliberately slow down your web shop and, well, maybe for just 50% of your visitors, so do an A/B test, and then check the impact on the revenue. And with that number, you can convince, well, whoever to actually work on performance. Full throttle,
Yeah.
I would say. I also agree with Wouter. Don't implement all best practices at once, because otherwise you don't know what will work for other cases. So if you implement one, well, page speed recommendation or best practice at basically per deploy, then you know what is working, and you also have a big chance that that strategy will also work in other cases.
Yeah.
So from an agency perspective, that's always good to know, to have such knowledge. For example, if if one specific optimization isn't working, you know it isn't worth investing any more time. I'm going to add a comment in the chat about because what I just described is what Holland and Barrett actually did. And I just pasted it in the chat as well. And if I'm correct, well, I don't have it open anymore, but they were talking about something about an impact of 3 million. Obviously, the bigger your web shop and the more revenue you have, the bigger the impact will be. And it's now, oh, I think I actually removed the specific comment from the chat, but I'll read it out loud. At Holland and Barrett, we intentionally slowed the site down for 50% of users by just 1 second. We hit statistical significance quite quickly and learned that just 1 second was worth 3 million to the business. Load time became a metric the board were very interested in from that point. So yeah, it made a big impact. I'll once again copy the exact link to the exact, here we go, comment as well. All right.
So we should all add a sleep in the index of Shopware for a second.
Could be a strategy, but I also get that it's
burn.
very, it's hard to convince other stakeholders to actually do that. Yeah.
No, but even I mean they do 50%, but I can even imagine that with a smaller segment, right? You might already see some impact. So that makes sense. It's a very interesting approach.
Yeah, because there are studies out there, and Google has numbers about the impact, but it will be different for your web shop because you might have a different niche, different competitors, etc. So it will never be the same number for your specific client or shop, etc.
Yeah, good point. And I think especially with B2B, I see a lot of merchants very reluctant to invest in performance because their assumption is that given that they're B2B, apparently people don't care about a slow web shop all of a sudden, right? It's the perception is that B2C it really matters. B2B people apparently like to have a cup of coffee while they click around. So yeah, that might be a good approach. Jon, do you have any insights or examples of return on investment?
Yeah, a lot of good things were said here already. So yeah, I won't repeat that. There's multiple good studies on the web about the importance of web performance and its impact on the bottom line. But there's from our customer base, there's one actual case study from real life that I would like to mention, because these guys did exactly what we talked about just now. They just started or they implemented image optimization with image engine, and that was it. That was all they did, and they wanted to measure the difference. This is a client in Asia where most of their users are mobile, and their site was very image heavy and and the goods they sold was also very easily consumable on a mobile device. It was cheap and it was and they increased the number of sales, checkouts by 10% just by starting to optimizing the images. So that was like overnight, turning on a flip switch, and then sales was up 10%. And that was only because of the images. I don't have numbers on LCP or page load time or things like that, but only sales. There was kind of a end-to-end metric of the impact of optimizing images. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, amazing. And now you're guaranteeing this all for all your clients, right?
Of course.
Otherwise, full refund. Right. I think it makes sense, especially if your shop is all very slow, and you can make a big improvement through simply optimizing images or what have you. Turning on cache. I think about to your point, varnish is really a miracle cure to some web shops. It makes so much difference. So yeah, absolutely. Or even just upscaling in resource, right? A lot of shops, I see that they start out, let's say 3 years ago, with a little bit of traffic. They never increase their server resources, and you'd be surprised what a twice as big server does for performance sometimes. Before we go into the Q&A, I want to pose a final question to all of you, and that is the future of performance optimization. Let's do the near future. So let's say this year and 2025. What is the hot stuff we should be looking out for? What is worth investing in? Erwin, I'll start off with you.
It's something that Google is really pushing, and I also see it in the chat already as well, shared by Toon van Doorn. Which is it's part of the speculation rules API, which basically means you can. It was already part of browsers back in the days, but each browser started to implement it in a different way, and it started to actually hit your analytics. So browsers could pre-render pages, but as a result, it would look like you had more visitors than you actually had, because, well, browsers were in a hidden way pre-rendering those pages. So they abandoned the pre-rendering part, and then basically, just recently started picking this up again in a better way. So it reiterated, you could say. And yeah, they now introduce speculation rules. Google has a very good documentation about this as well, which basically means you can choose to either pre-fetch just the HTML page or pre-render the whole page, where even CSS, font files, and JavaScript files will be downloaded and executed. And it only involves a little piece, I should say a little snippet of JSON code to instruct the browser what to do on specific pages. So if I'm on a listing page, you can, once again, just with a piece of JSON, instruct the browser to already pre-fetch or pre-render product pages on hover or touch start event, for example. As a matter of fact, you can set the eagerness, and there are 4 levels. Nevertheless, one of them could be on hover pre-render a specific page, which means that once the user starts to actually click on a product page, it's instantly there already, because it was basically pre-rendered as if it was a real page hit in a hidden tab, and Google will then just show the page right away. It will fix LCP, CLS, and IMP because the page is already fully rendered. There's nothing on the main thread anymore once I click on that page. So it's a page speed booster without much effort.
Yeah.
I should add that if you start to pre-render all pages, it could.
I wanted to ask.
The advantage is it could work as a cache warmer, but you will also end up having more server load, obviously. So that would be something to monitor as well.
Yeah, and a huge mobile data bill for the whoever is visiting your site.
Yeah, although it is an API, it's a browser API. So as a result, the browser, for example, like Google Chrome, could say, okay, someone is on a 3G connection or someone is not on a Wi-Fi, so we are not going. Yeah, we are not going to pre-render as eager.
Yeah. All right. So can someone should probably mute themselves? I hear a lot of background noise.
All right, but that's my addition.
All right, thank you very much, Jon. What are we looking forward to next year?
Yeah, so things happen very fast in our business. Yeah, for the next year, in terms of images, I'm going to throw JPEG XL in there again. The last 12 months or even more of the history of JPEG XL has been very interesting, where Google was in the boat from the very beginning, actually, and then suddenly they abandoned the whole project and didn't want to invest more in JPEG XL, so they removed everything from Chrome and said that they wanted to focus on existing formats. But then a short time later, Apple suddenly implemented full support or some support for JPEG XL. JPEG XL is in my view, a superior format to compared to any of the other usual suspects. First of all, it's an image format. It's not a image format made from a video codec like AVIF is, and even WebP. That means that JPEG XL is you can have progressive loading of the image, like when you start showing the image before it's completely downloaded, like a pixelated kind of version first, and then it gradually becomes better, like we know from progressive JPEGs.
Yeah.
And it's lossless, and it's even JPEG backwards compatible, and no royalty and stuff. So it's awesome format. It's in our metrics, it's usually a little bit smaller in terms of bytes than AVIF, which says a lot that it's a lot smaller than WebP. I was seeing in the chat here that someone using started to use WebP just now, and they saw a huge decrease in size. JPEG XL is going to be much less than WebP. The only downside, two downsides to JPEG XL, I guess, three, including the lack of browser support. You have to serve something else than JPEG XL to Chrome browsers, for instance. But there's the other two things. Is that it's slightly more resource heavy on the client side in the browser to actually decode and display the image. So it's using more electricity and using more CPU basically, or GPU on the device. And lastly, Safari hasn't implemented the entire specification of JPEG XL. JPEG XL can do a lot of things, including animations, for instance, animated GIFs and stuff. But then in JPEG XL, that part is not implemented. So it's only static images and things. But in general, we see that the quality versus visual quality versus byte size ratio is much better on JPEG compared to all other image formats. So for a typical product image, I guess you could say JPEG XL is definitely preferred. So I would recommend starting experimenting with JPEG XL for sure for the next couple of months. And I'm pretty sure Google and Chrome somehow will have to come crawling back to the JPEG XL ship. Because I think it was a poor decision. Must be some political stuff going on in there. So and do subscribe to the thread, the bug thread in the Chrome project. It's quite entertaining to read all the feedback sometimes.
Leave it up to developers to be very opinionated and vocal about it, right?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Wouter, last, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, so not really very new technical stuff. The thing that's new is that so as I was saying, Shopware 6 is growing. It's getting bigger. It's getting more usage. The shops that have been built are getting older. Some legacy in there. A lot of things. It's like, well, it's not bloatware, but everything is getting bigger. And I think we're now at the point that most of the shops that we have, you should treat them like a Formula One car. You tweak, you fine tune, and you see how it's going. And new test round, and this way you keep them up to speed and performing. And with that, also take into account a certain budget for doing the updates, for keeping this performance nice and dandy, because otherwise, in the long run, it's because it's a moving target. The whole core web vitals, so it's a statistic average, and everybody wants to move towards the 100. But if you're not
Yeah.
moving and the rest is, in the end, you're falling
That's a
behind.
good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So that, I think, for most of our customers, that's what we're going to focus on, and see how we can do this on a regular basis and keep them performing well.
All right. All right, clear. Thank you very much. That brings us at the end of our panel discussion, and I think we can open it up for questions. But before I do that and hand it over to Sarah with the first question, I really want to thank you all for coming out, for sharing your knowledge, making the time. Maybe a quick round. Where can people best reach out to you or read more about you? I'll start with Jon.
Yeah, the best way to reach out to me these days is actually LinkedIn. I'm out of X. I really want to get out of Facebook. So LinkedIn. I'll share my link to LinkedIn in the chat here.
Perfect.
Mm.
Wouter?
I would join Jon in that. LinkedIn is for me the best way to connect with me and talk to me. Yeah.
All right. Erwin, are you gonna break the combo?
Break combo, I'm going to join them. Also
Okay.
LinkedIn or my very own website, erwinhoffman.com. But I'll also be sure to just paste a link in the chat.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. And with that, I'll give it over to Sergey.
Yeah, thanks. Meanwhile, I have a lot of questions. Okay. I will keep it short or try at least. So you mentioned cash. Me and my colleagues also in the call, we also do a lot for some customers, which where performance is very important. So on cash, you mentioned Redis and Varnish. So what is your suggestion and experience? And is the difference between these two significant? Is it worth to invest in Varnish? Because I think it's more complicated to set up. Or do you say, no, there is no difference? So is it worth to do the extra work for Varnish?
In general, again, I'm not a technical guy. If it's going to be technical, I'm still looking at Alexander, but he's still quiet. But in general, we notice that varnish, there's only one way to do varnish, and then that's right. You have to do it right. If you don't do it right, you are in big trouble, because you will have dynamic things that are cached, like a card, for instance, or the content of the card. But if you do it right, it is really, really worthwhile. And if it's done properly, especially with like high usage shops, it's even, your performance is even improving. It's such a great tool. The only thing is to keep in mind, there's, before that, I always say cache is like the turbo on the engine. But if the engine is not running well, it doesn't have a good effect. It's just blocking, it's hiding the real problems. So first get the engine running properly, and then use varnish, like I said, like a turbo on the engine, and it really works. Does that answer your
maybe
question?
Yeah.
and I'll maybe add to that I think the biggest difference is that with Varnish, it doesn't hit your server, or it doesn't hit Shopware per se. With Redis, it will still hit your server. It'll just reply faster. So I think a very big benefit of Varnish is the fact that your actual server load goes down drastically, even in terms of connections.
Okay. Good. Thanks. So the second one is maybe it's also then related to Varnish. So, or how do you deal with the Shopware's cache invalidation strategy? Because in the 6.4, 6.5, it was maybe a little bit too drastical, or I don't know, in some places we just, or a colleague of mine now, remove it at all. So because it's with every product change, with so many places where you click save and admin, you mess up the cache, and there are so many pitfalls, like call it. How do you deal, or it's again a little bit question, a technical question, but is there a strategy or some best practice or some experience you can share here?
That would not be an easy answer for me. Maybe Sander can help me out.
That is a very good question, to be honest.
I could try to answer that one, but
Yeah.
it is going to be a time-consuming well, it's one obviously, but I guess the challenge, it is a challenge, is to well, yeah, once again, try to cache the parts that are more eligible for caching and try to dynamically render the parts that are more dynamic, which makes a lot of sense. But to implement it into an existing platform is obviously going to be time consuming. But for example, yeah, the checkout, the cart contents will be dynamic. Maybe even product variants are going to be dynamic, colors, etc. Availability of a product, is it in stock, etc. Those will, well, are more typically to be dynamic. However, a big part of a product page will almost never change or not change as frequently. So you can then choose to code split it, render some parts in a more dynamic way so that other parts are more eligible for server-side caching and can stay in the cache for a longer duration as well. But yeah, once again, I do acknowledge that it is going to be a time-consuming solution.
Yeah, I think there's a saying, right? There are two things hard in tech. It's cache invalidation and naming things.
Yeah, absolutely. Good.
All right. Anyone else any questions, or Sergey, if you have more? I mean, I don't want to stop you.
Yeah, I wait for other people. So if there's nothing more, then my list is quite big.
And maybe what we can even do is open a Slack channel on our Shopware United Slack on the specific topic. It might even be interesting to have a
idea.
dedicated channel for this. So we will make sure that that there's a channel after the end of this webinar.
About cache invalidation, I have experienced that the B2B seller suite has a specific cache per customer option, and that will increase your cache size, multiple gigabytes instead of just a couple of megabytes. And if you disable it, it will disable the caching in full, and then you don't even have the default Shopware caching. So they do not have the option to go back to the default Shopware caching. So that's a feature that they still have to create.
Interesting.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. I will ask the guys from B2B sellers. Thanks.
I think yes, Steve Kramer asked a question. Using less plugins than a lot of plugins, does this affect the performance a lot, or would it be advised to put functionality of a lot of plugins into one single plugin? Wouter, shall I
Yeah.
give this one to you?
Less is more, of course. What you will see is when you have a commercial plugin or more, then you will use some of the functionality that's in there, but not all. So you will have functionality added that you're not going to use, which is so it's better to have less plugins. I do not know if it would work to have all the functionality in one, like super plugin. I would not know how that would be done.
That sounds
I
like
think they mean custom built plugins. If you
Yeah,
are
yeah,
building your plugins yourself.
Yeah.
And I would not advise this maintainability wise.
No, exactly.
Just split it per feature that you're building on, per epic that your project is on.
Yeah,
at least.
I agree, Toon.
But be very critical of what you put in any plugin, right? Every line of code that has to get executed is a line too much.
Yeah.
Every query that you execute is a query too much.
And remove it when you don't use it anymore, because that's what we see a lot as well. Like people say, oh, I want to test this plugin and do that, and it just stacks up, but it's really adds up to the lines of code. And what did Mark Stanley said? Shopware now has 1.5 million lines of code already.
Yeah, they
That you get those for free, and then
yeah. So what you put in yourself, you should probably maintain. Do a bit
Yeah.
of Maria Kondo so now and then on your installation, right?
Clean
See
out
if
the
it
closet.
sparks joy. Yeah. See if the plugin sparks joy.
What we do performance-wise, we often use the language plugin. You get 20, 25 languages. And if you put in data with the integration, all the languages are empty because we only use 2, 3 of them with actual content. And we just clean out the language pack of all the unused languages, and that saves a lot of database size and thus performance. The same with currencies. Just keep in the British pound, euros, and the dollars, and skip all the other stuff that you're not likely to use.
That's a good tip. I like it. Yeah, it's a good one.
I remember on another platform, I'll not name any names. There used to be a price.phml file with a lot of evaluations, including energy tax and what have you. And at some point, I made a dressed down version of that with basically like 10 lines, and you could actually see it in the performance because it was just so many queries, evaluations, what have you. And it's, yeah. All right. Any other questions?
Maybe one more from my side. So have you also now experienced with Shopware 6.6? Did the performance increase a lot there because the guys did a lot of refactorings also on cache invalidation and also on how JavaScript is bundled and loaded, if I remember correct. So have you also experienced there? Is there
Not yet.
increase in?
So personally, I haven't seen any, Wouter, maybe from your end or Erwin.
No.
Too early days.
Then we let you know.
Yes,
Yeah,
we'll
we're slowly moving to because 6.5 was quite a project for most of our customers, and it's a hard sell now. We have 6.6 now, but we're slowly getting there, but no real metrics yet.
All right. To finish this off, I want to take on.
Sorry, Sander,
yeah.
there are several questions in the chat from Attila.
That's just what I wanted to say. So
Okay.
to finish this off, I want to take rapid fire the questions from Attila. He posed 6, so I'll pose these, and whoever has any recommendation, let's do this rapid fire. So first, how would I intentionally slow down a shop for the mentioned A/B test? So I already mentioned putting a sleep in the index. Any other recommendations?
You could, if I am allowed to chime in, you could, for example, add a loading is lazy attribute. Well, first of all, I hope you do not have a loading is lazy attribute at your biggest visible image at this moment. If so, then you're basically already, even if you're using WebP images or, well, what are small filed images, even if you do still have loading is lazy attribute on your main image, then it will continue to be slower than necessary. So if you would optimize that, and then are looking into slowing down your LCP, for example, your visually, well, yeah, experienced performance, you could then deliberately add the loading is lazy attribute, for example. Then you do not really need to delay your server, but could do it just by introducing one simple attribute. Back in the days, we needed to use JavaScript to lazy load other images. Nowadays, it's a native natively available attribute. So once again, loading is lazy should then be enough to already delay your image delivery. I would add, and you can see a bit of well, what we are using, and I'm part of Runvision myself. You should in fact monitor obviously well, the LCP timing of both with and without loading is lazy to actually be able to tell what the revenue impact is when your LCP is regressing by 100, 200, 300 milliseconds. So that's how you could deliberately slow down your LCP as well.
Okay. Good point on tooling. Wouter, what was the plugin mentioned to track the page speed by time to first byte?
This guy next to me, Runvision.
Runvision?
Yeah.
All right. Then how about MySQL versus MariaDB? I'll put in Percona there. Anyone else has an opinion about what is faster? I think so. MySQL and MariaDB are both very generic database engines. If you go to something like Postgres or Percona, you're actually going for performance. Neither MySQL or Maria is made for performance per se. They're more made for concurrency, stability, what have you. Nginx versus normal server. I'll say Nginx there.
Nginx,
Anyone else?
yeah. No, agree.
Again, Apache is made to be very generic, very stable, very easy to manage. Nginx is very much made for performance. Then the influence of SSD and NVMe SSD drives. Honestly, I know the latter is better, but I don't know what the difference is in terms of numbers.
No.
But given that they're more expensive, I'm sure it's
Probably better. Yeah.
And then faster service, your experiences with which hosters. Maybe someone wants to recommend one or two hosting providers that deliver.
Yeah, we 99% of the time we work with Hypernode, and we also like working with Max Cluster for the German customers.
Yep. I'll maybe put in Scale Commerce there. Big fan of them. They're great.
You get a big thumbs up from
Dennis,
that.
I'll send the invoice after this. Brilliant. All right. I think that brings us at the end of the questions. I want to thank everyone very much for bringing these questions to the webinar. Thank you for coming out. Do give us feedback if you think we can improve. And other than that, please follow our panelists on LinkedIn because that's the best place to be. Herbie.
There is one last question from Christian in the chat.
Yeah, I saw.
One more rapid fire if you have. There are more shops that don't deliver all JS to the Googlebot and achieve very high-speed results. Do you see any danger or disadvantages in that trickery? So before I give it to probably Erwin, because you're the best at this topic, I think. Whenever you apply trickery, I know Google tends to catch up and penalize you for many things.
Normally, yes. In this case, I'm drawing the conclusion that Christian might be looking at the Lighthouse score, while the Lighthouse score is basically only telling you anything about a synthetic test, which will not represent real users. Yep. That's basically where Google's Core Web Vitals comes in, because Core Web Vitals is in fact based on real users. I should add a subset of real users. Obviously, it's all part of the Google ecosystem. Core Web Vitals, Google Chrome browser, and Google SERPs. When you are visiting a website and when you are logged into your browser, Google Chrome browser, which you might be because maybe you use other Google products like YouTube, Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, you then often already, without actively knowing, already logged into Google Chrome. You will recognize by, well, your avatar at the top right. So if you're then using Google Chrome, your experiences are submitted to one big Google database called Crux, and Core Web Vitals is coming from Crux data. So that's based on real users. So yeah, you can exclude any JavaScript when doing a Lighthouse test, and you will see, are likely to see a 100% or 95% score, but that will not reflect real uses, and it will not reflect how actual real use of Core Web Vitals is being measured. So Run Vision is a tool that is measuring real use experiences real time. Core Web Vitals is delayed by 28 days, and once again, only based on a subset of only Google Chrome users. So is it trickery? Well, it is. You might be tricking your own stakeholders. You get a 100% Lighthouse score, which is very good for your stakeholders, they think. It's very good when you post it on LinkedIn, but it is not representing real users. So you are only tricking yourselves when excluding JavaScript for Lighthouse tests.
I mean, tricking on LinkedIn and tricking your stakeholders. I hear nothing but good stuff. So
yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, people. Thank you, and see you at the next webinar.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.